So once again, hello everyone, and welcome to Thesis Construction Workshop. My name is Mariah, and I am super duper excited to be reviewing Thesis Construction with you all. In addition to being an Ally Center tutor, I am an adjunct professor, and I specialize in writing. So I teach writing classes both in person and online. So I do a lot of discussion about thesis statements. A lot. So like I said, I'm really excited to be going over this with everybody today. So I'm going to start my slideshow. Hopefully, nope, you're fine. I tried to do this the other day too, and I was like, wait, no, that's the wrong order. Hold on. I promise I am a paid professional, y'all. We got this. Come on. There we go. All right, give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Super duper. So Thesis Construction 101, constructing clear and compelling claims. We're going to use that vocabulary all throughout our time together. But before we jump in, I want to ask you guys, what have you heard about in terms of a thesis statement? If you're like, okay, a thesis statement, what is it? I'm sort of familiar with it. If you had to define it, what would you say? It's okay if you're like, never heard of it, don't know what that is, but let's get a couple of answers out.
I believe it's just not just, but I believe it's like the topic of which you're writing about. And I want to say it has to be in the form of a question, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Excellent start. I love it. We got the idea of a topic and the idea of a question. Very, very good. Additional considerations. Richard.
It's the sisters' statement.
Statement. Okay.
The sisters. No, that's a joke. Now I have no idea what thesis means, but it's the sis. It's a joke. It's the sisters' statement.
It's true. Now we said that though, but it is true that it is a statement. So you made a joke, but you also said something true there. Very, very nice. You did a 2 for 1.
No,
Yeah. Anything you want to add in there?
Nope.
Okay. So whenever we think about a thesis, sometimes we think about it more broadly in terms of message. So if you've ever been asked to, for example, maybe in high school, you were asked to analyze a piece of writing, and you're saying they asked you to identify, hey, what's the thesis of the book? What's the overarching idea or message of the book? And certainly we can use the word thesis for that to say, hey, what's the overarching idea or message of a book or something like that. However, a thesis statement has some additional components and parts, especially whenever we're thinking about it in the context of an essay, an academic essay. And again, for our workshop today, we're going to talk specifically about an expository and persuasive essays. And that's really what we're going to be thinking about. Again, for FAS 100 or for LAN 100, those are going to be expository or informational in nature, whether it's information where you have to do research or it's informational thinking about your own life and telling people the information about your life. Persuasive essays being, okay, I'm trying to actually change someone's mind about this topic. They believe this and I want to persuade them. So those are the two basic contexts that we're going to be talking about with regard to thesis statements. So let's move forward here. So what is a thesis statement? I have some slides here, some concepts for us to review. So number one, a thesis statement, a good thesis statement will always address the prompt or the question that is being asked by the professor. So for each of your cases, your professor has asked you for your final papers to do something. For faith and learning, you're writing a paper that's reflecting on these 3 principles, 3 to 5 principles, and how those principles have interacted with your life. And so your thesis statement is going to capture that information. Your expository essay is focusing on a single topic and it's delivering information about that topic. For LAN 101, you have 2 persuasive essays where you're arguing 2 separate sides of one single issue. So your thesis statement is going to answer that. Number 2, your thesis statement is going to include your stance and it's going to make some kind of claim. Now, this is going to be the case whether you're talking about a persuasive essay or just some sort of informational essay. You're still going to be saying something. So if it's a persuasive essay, I might say something like, Christians in America should vote to overturn the income tax or something like that. So that's an argumentative stance. Hello there, is this William? Maybe. Hello,
Yes, ma'am,
hello.
it's me.
Wonderful, William. My name's Mariah. Welcome to our workshop. I want to make sure I had your attendance recorded so you get credit for coming to the workshop. Thanks for joining us. Defining a thesis statement. So again, so persuasively, you're going to say, hey, this group of people should do this thing. Even if it's expository though. So there are both pros and cons to owning an electric vehicle. So I'm not necessarily trying to persuade people one way or the other in regards to an electric vehicle, but I'm at least putting a claim out there that there are pros and cons. And I'm going to be, and it lets the reader know, hey, I'm going to be telling you about both sides of this issue. Next, your thesis statement will often include your audience. So Christian Americans should. Now, in the second example that I gave, it didn't, right? I just said that there are both pros and cons of owning an electric vehicle. And so in that case, my audience is sort of hidden. It's ambiguous. So this is an often, but not an always. So your thesis statement sometimes will include your audience. If it's persuasive essay, your professor will probably nudge you a little bit more to thinking about including your audience. For those expository essays where you're just sort of delivering information, it's not as important for your audience to be sort of front-loaded. And even in some persuasive essays where you're not going to see that happen. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into each of these as we go. Number 4, it's a roadmap. And this is really going to be helpful for your readers. I'm going to admit another person. Hello, hello. Welcome to the workshop. Is this Robert? Hello, Nin. Hello, hello. Perhaps Robert Hansen?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name's Mariah. Welcome to the workshop. We're so glad to have you. We're just talking through a thesis statement here. So it's a roadmap. So a clear thesis statement will allow your readers to see everything that you're going to talk about. So Regina mentioned that your thesis statement involves your topic, and that's absolutely correct. So your thesis statement is not just going to say, hey, this is sort of broadly speaking what my paper is going to be about, but it's going to tell your reader, hey, this is the order that I'm going to address everything in. Very, very helpful. Number 5, your thesis statement, I say, lives at the end of your introduction. So every essay should have an introductory paragraph. And as I like to remind my classes probably every week, maybe every other week, okay, guys, now which sentence should your thesis statement be? And they're like, at the end of the introduction. That's right. We don't want your professor to have to hunt for your thesis statement. Last sentence of your introduction is a spectacular place for it. Your professors will never have to guess. Living it at the end of your introduction is exactly where you want it to be. Last but not least, a thesis statement is a single sentence, and this is particularly in the context of an academic essay where you are writing just like, even if it's like 8 to 10 pages, your thesis statement doesn't need to be 17 pages long. If you are writing a 400-page book, you are welcome to take your thesis and to transfer it into like a full introduction so that you can sort of take a whole bunch of sentences to talk through the main ideas that you're talking about. However, for our academic essays, your professors really just want one single sentence that lives at the end of the introduction, responds to the prompt, includes your stance in the audience, and lays out a broad roadmap for your readers. And again, we're going to come back to these in more detail. Now, we've talked about what a thesis statement is. Now let's talk about what a thesis statement is not. This will be exciting. A thesis statement is not just your topic. So Regina said, hey, well, I know it involves your topic, and it does, but your topic is sort of like an umbrella, and then your thesis statement actually makes a claim. So if I just say my topic is homelessness in Pennsylvania, that's an umbrella. If I say my topic is pros and cons of electric vehicles or caregiving, so those are topics. I'm sort of like, okay, well, but what direction am I going? No idea. So your thesis statement will actually tell the readers what position you're taking and what the roadmap is, what specific areas you're going to be covering underneath that topic. Also, a topic is usually just a word or phrase, where a thesis statement is in fact a full sentence. Now, a thesis statement is also not a question. However, what I do like to say, and sometimes whenever I teach thesis statements, I'll actually use a research question to help us get there. I'm not going to today, but you can ask a research question, and then the answer to that question will be your thesis statement. So if you're doing research and you're saying, okay, I'm trying to find the answer to the question, what are the causes of homelessness in Pennsylvania? The answer to the question would be your thesis statement. So again, right on the right track there, Regina. Nice thoughts. Number 3, a thesis statement is not a fact. So whenever we're thinking about just doing thesis statements, we don't, especially persuasive thesis statements, we don't want to just say the sun is round. It's probably not even round. The sun is hot. Like, that's not really something that you can explore in an essay, and especially not for an argumentative essay. So this applies, Marvina, especially for your LAN 101 class. We want to be broader than just facts. It's also not just an opinion. And again, so this is specifically for most of our scholarly essays. The one that might be a little bit closer to opinion is our foundations paper, where you're reflecting on your faith and learning. But even for that paper, you're still taking principles that have applied in your life, and you're integrating research. So your thesis statement isn't just going to be something like, I think grapes are the best fruit, which they are, by the way, they're the best fruit. But you could disagree with me. And like, a thesis statement isn't just going to be an opinion. It is going to be stance that's backed up by some evidence, as we'll talk about a little bit more in just a moment. A thesis statement is not a hook. How many of you have ever heard the term a hook beyond just Captain Hook? Okay, and most of us are like, well, yeah, of course I've heard it in terms of Captain Hook. But if you were going to define what a hook is in terms of writing, or in terms of an essay, what is a hook? Anybody want to jump in on that?
Your twist on it. But that's another word that, it's not, you gotta like, it doesn't really tell you what it means.
Regina.
I kind of think of it in like musical terms, but it
that's
can
all
kind
I
of relate. Like your hook is like what draws them in.
Good. Yeah. So I like to define it in short terms, like an attention grabber. And we talk about using a statistic or a short story, or maybe even a question itself, to grab your readers and draw them in. Your hook is going to be at the beginning of your introduction. Remember, we said our thesis statement is going to be at the end of the introduction, not at the beginning. And finally, your thesis statement is not your entire introduction. I've seen a lot of new writers, whenever they go to write their thesis statement, sometimes they'll take it and they'll spread out their thesis statement throughout the entire introduction. And they'll just say like 6 sentences, and 6 sentences later, like, well, this whole thing was my thesis. And again, especially for the context of academic writing, where you're doing essays that are not super, super long, you really want to confine your thesis statement to one concise sentence that's located at the end of your introduction. So that's a little bit about what it is and what it's not. Are you guys ready to get down into some of the actual steps to how to craft a thesis statement? I hope so, because that's what we're doing next. Ready or not? Here we go. Before we do that, though, I do want to just say, why bother? Like, why can't I just skip the introduction and launch straight into my essay?
Yeah.
It's a great question, right? You're like, why? Why? I know that whenever I do my Bible study lessons, sometimes I'm tempted to skip the entire introduction. And I'm like, okay, guys, look, you were here last week. We're still in Genesis. Let's go. So what does a thesis statement do? So for us as the writer, it provides focus. I don't know about you guys, but whenever I'm writing, sometimes I just go into the wild blue yonder and I'm just like, I'm just doing stuff. I'm just talking about stuff. And I don't really have necessarily an idea of what I need to talk about. The thesis statement provides the focus to say, hey, I am only talking about these 3 positives and these 3 negatives of electric vehicles. I'm not talking about this other fun experience that I had, even though that's a fun thing to write about. It's actually not relevant to what I'm aiming to tell the readers. It also serves as a planning tool. We're going to talk about this at the end. A good thesis statement will help provide a baseline for how you construct your outline for the entire paper, which will be really helpful. Now, as the reader, we don't want to just be thinking about ourselves. We always want to be thinking about our audience. Ultimately, we don't, for most of the time, we don't just write to sort of get our thoughts into the void, although some of us, if we like to journal, that might be something that is helpful. But for most of the time, we're writing to an audience. And so for our readers, a thesis statement serves as that map to guide the reader through the paper. And each new paragraph, again, it links back to that planning tool. A good thesis statement will link to each paragraph, and it'll help the reader get a sense of, oh, I know the organization and the structure of what's happening in this paper. And a strong thesis statement, along with that hook, will create a reason to keep reading. I tell my students whenever they're writing hooks that they don't want to create a hook that's just fun or exciting or just that's disconnected from their thesis statement. Having that strong thesis statement that links to the hook and then links into the rest of the paper tells your readers, hey, I'm writing about serious things. I have content that I want to present to you. I've thought about it. I've organized it well, and you're going to want to pay attention to what I have to say. Whether you feel confident in your writing now or not. Ultimately, that's our goal, right? We want to be able to be presenting information to our readers in ways that is clear, that's understandable, and that ultimately benefits them. And the more organized and structured and understandable we are, the easier it'll be for them to get what we're trying to put out to them. So, steps to develop a thesis statement.
Okay.
This is where we really get down to business. Sorry, I won't sing again for the rest of it. I am not Mariah Carey. I cannot sing like her. Okay, so first we're going to select our topic. So each of you are in classes right now. Most of you are in probably either foundations of the foundations class, LAN 100 or LAN 101, or you've just had it. Has everybody had or is in one of those classes? FAS 100, LAN 100, LAN 101? Yes. Yeah, great. Fabulous. So for each of those, you need to have a topic. Whether it's, okay, I'm picking principles, that's reflecting about my life, that's FAS 100. LAN 100 is that expository essay where you're taking a topic and you're just going to talk about it. Music theory. I don't know why that popped into my head. Goodness gracious, that totally threw me off. Causes of homelessness, etc. And then I know, again, Marvina is in LAN 101, and hers is going to be persuasive. So she's going to have to argue both sides of a debatable issue. So that's going to be the first and sometimes the hardest step, is picking a good topic. And we're going to come back and spend some additional time on each one of these steps. But just so you know, if you're like, oh my gosh, we're going really fast, we're going to move on to the next step, and then we're going to come back to each one of these. Step number 2 is to envision your audience. And again, this is going to be a little bit more useful whenever it comes to your persuasive essays. Not quite as necessary whenever it comes to FAS 100 and LAN 100. But even so, at the end of the day, who is our number 1 audience for all of these papers that we're writing? Well, maybe number 2. There are a couple of possible right answers to this question.
The professor?
Yes, and the professor is the person that I was thinking of, and then I was like, well, the Lord. Obviously, we're writing everything for the Lord, and I was like, oh wait, no, that's also a right answer. But yes, ultimately, the professor is the one that we're writing to, and so we want to be definitely having them in mind. What are their expectations for how we're writing, even if it's not the natural way that we would write or what feels absolutely normal for us? We want to be thinking about writing to our audience. Bless you. Number 3, construct your stance or you're clean. And again, this is going to be a little bit different depending on what class you're in and what you're trying to do with your writing. FAS 100, you're talking about how your faith is intersecting with your learning. LAN 100, you're talking about presenting some information about one specific topic. And of course, for LAN 101, you're arguing first for this side and then for that side. Number 4 is build your subclaims. Depending on what class you're in, you may also hear the term supports, reasoned, or you'll see on a later slide, even evidences. Basically, these are the things that are going to undergird what you're talking about. It's the specific things that you talk about in each paragraph. Again, we're going to come back. We're going to spend some more time on this. So just hang in there with me. We'll keep rolling. We're going to build all of these things together into a big, beautiful, cohesive, and complete sentence. Remember, our thesis statement is not 17 sentences long. It's going to all combine into one big, beautiful sentence at the end of the day. And we're going to walk our way through each of these steps. So let's go. So first of all, we have topic selection. How many of you guys have made your way into our LBC page in general? You've been to lbc.edu. Give me a thumbs up, give me a wave, give me a hoot and holler or something. Super. How many of you have made it to our library page? Good. Oh, great job. Great job. Don't need to do the rest of this workshop. That's it. We're done. How many of you have been to our research guides? Oh, okay, good. Okay. Still a lot of
The
us.
owl.
The library. In the library.
So the research guides is different from OWL. So I will actually, I'm going to show everybody in just a second. I just sort of wanted to get a feel for it, because if everybody's like, oh yeah, I've been through all of this, and I'm like, okay, let me show you the whole thing. But I will go ahead and I'm going to show you guys this whole thing. But so this page, whenever we send this out, will be available for you in the PowerPoint. And so whenever you're looking for starter ideas, especially for LAN 100 and LAN 101, there are a few databases. Does anybody know what a database is? What's a database? Basic definition. Marvina.
It's just a condensed location where you can find like specific topics, I guess, and it's not as broad as the library.
Okay, good. Thanks, Robert. Marvina, do you want to add on to that?
I was just going to say it's a container that you look for information and
Excellent.
for research.
Excellent. Good. So essentially, if you think about our physical campus, the physical campus of LBC has a physical library that has physical books. You've probably, even if you haven't been to our physical campus, you've been to a library and you've seen books on the shelves. Although, y'all, my students that come in, because I teach those in-person classes, I was talking to them about bookends, and they're like, what's a bookend? And I was like, what do you mean, what's a bookend? So anyway, physical libraries, they're going out of style, y'all. But so a database is essentially an online library. And like Robert said, it's not as big as just like the worldwide library. There's specific cultivated groups of, as Marvina said, containers of information. So some of them are focused on medicine, some of them are focused on technology, some of them are focused on theology, and some of them are a little bit broader. So we have a whole bunch of databases available for us at LBC, but pin that, because before we get into the databases, we have the research guides. Now, our research guides are organized by academic subject. And so you'll click on literature and language, which will bring us to the drop down of English composition LAN 101. There's one for LAN 100 as well. However, I think that the one for English Comp LAN 101 is actually organized a little bit better. It contains a lot of the same information, but it's just laid out in a nicer format. So I'm just going to direct you to the one for English Comp LAN 101. Will take you to the home page. The home page isn't super useful, so you're going to click on databases and tutorials. And that page will lay out these 3 starter databases: Credo Reference, Issues and Controversies, and Gale in Context. So what I'm going to do right now is I am going to actually take you guys there. Can everybody still see my screen?
Yes.
I'm gonna go to lbc.edu/library. I'm going to take you through those steps that I just talked through. So we're on the library page. I'm going to scroll down on the left-hand side under the Find menu. There's Research Guides. I'm going to click on that. Notice it organized by subject. So I'm going to go down
We only
to,
see your
You're
PowerPoint.
still, yeah,
are
you're
we
in PowerPoint
supposed
still.
to see it? We only see the first page.
got it. Perfect.
Yeah. Mhm.
This is why I always double check. All right, can you see my screen now? The library webpage? Perfect. So let me go back. So this is the library homepage. Scroll down under the Find menu, you click on Research Guides. And that takes you to the subjects. We scroll down to Literature and Language. Now, again, notice that we have both one for Foundations for Effective College Writing and one for English Comp LEN 101. I do think that this one's a little bit better. So I'm going to show you this one. You're welcome to explore any of the research guides, of course. And then remember, the home page, not especially useful, so we're going to go all the way into databases and tutorials. And these three links, Gale in Context, the Credo Pro-Con, and Issues and Controversies, are each databases. They're online libraries, individual containers of information that are great places to look to find topics to research. So I don't know about you, but whenever I'm like, okay, I need to think of a topic to explore, my mind first goes blank, and then it panics and talks about music and goes to music theory, which I don't want to research. I don't want to research music theory. My music pastor likes to talk about music theory, and I stop listening whenever he talks about music theory. But I don't know. Like, I don't know what I don't know. And so I'm like, well, I don't know what to research for anything. And so these databases are helpful because you can take a look, and for Gale in Context, it'll have like a scrolling list of some top issues of interest for today. It has, if you click on this link right here underneath the light bulb, browse issues, it'll have a full list of things that you could research and write about. And you can click on each of those and get some additional information.
Nice.
Credo, the Pro-Con sub database in Credo has a whole bunch of articles that lay out two sides of a single issue. So for Marvina in LEN 101, or anybody else, whenever you get to LEN 101, if you're interested in writing those for and against essays, or even if you want to write a pro-con expository essay, this can be an interesting way to go about it. So if you scroll down here, I just want to show you briefly, you'll see that these articles are organized and they have the top pro and con arguments for both sides, which is really nice. Issues and Controversies is similar. They both have a list of issues from A to Z, and then they have pro-con articles as well. They're just organized a little bit differently. So again, these are some helpful places to go when you're looking to pick a topic. And you look through the list and you read some articles and you're like, oh my goodness, this is great. I have come up with some great ideas. Can you now see my screen that we have moved back to the PowerPoint? Give me a thumbs up if you can still see the PowerPoint. Beautiful. Now,
Thumbs up.
once you're looking through the list and you're thinking through, let's say that you are deciding and you're like, okay, I've come up with my top 3 ideas for a topic. Death penalty, homeschooling, and abortion. These are my top 3 ones. My next suggestion is to say, okay, how interested am I in this topic, and could I write something about it? Because we want to avoid something that you really don't actually have interest in, and you want to avoid picking something that you don't have any background knowledge in. Because for your schoolwork, you don't want to have to like go out and start a farm from scratch. You want to have something in your mind so that you're not again, just starting from nothing. So what I would recommend is that you also do a free write for each topic that you're interested in. How many of you have ever done a free write? Ooh, so a free write is whenever it's a strategy. It's a brainstorming strategy, where you set a timer, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and you pick up your writing utensil and you say, okay, I'm going to write everything that I can about either the prompt or the topic, and I'm not going to stop writing until the timer goes off. And if I run out of things to say, I'm going to write, I don't know what else to write about the death penalty. I don't know what else to write about the death penalty until you think of something else that's relevant to write about the death penalty. Now, this can be really helpful. First of all, if you find that you're really going and you're really excited and you look down at that free write when the timer goes off and you have like a whole bunch of different ideas that you can write about, maybe there's like 4 that you're like, ooh, I bet that I could do some research on those. That might be a helpful way for you to sort of think about what do you already know and what directions can you go for your research. On the other hand, if you write about homeschool for 1.5 minutes and then you're writing, I don't know what else to write for 8.5 minutes, that's a good sign that maybe you're like, okay, well, I liked that idea in concept, but maybe I just don't know enough about that in order to dedicate the rest of the subterm to researching and writing about this topic. Maybe that's just more work than I want to take on. And maybe it is work that you want to take on. Maybe you're like, no, I'm excited. I really want to know about this topic. And that's fine. You're welcome to do that. But just be aware that that can be a struggle, and doing a free write can help avoid you having to spend excessive amounts of time doing research on something that you could do something that you have some background knowledge in. Any questions so far? Those of you who have been with me before know that this is really just code for Mariah's going to take a sip of water. All right. So let's keep on rolling. Now, the other thing that I will say is that whenever you're selecting your topics, one of the things that you're going to want to check, especially for your expository essays for LEN 100 and your topics for LEN 101, is just to check to make sure that there's scholarly stuff written about it. I'm going to show you guys how to do that a little bit later. But if there's nothing that's been written about your topic, you're going to have some trouble. You're going to have trouble. I had a student once who really wanted to write, and I can't remember exactly what he wrote, but it was something like anime versus superheroes. And I was like, I think you're going to have trouble finding research. And he was like, nope, I'm going to be fine. And I was like, I really think you're going to have trouble. And he did really have trouble. He did have trouble finding scholarly resources, and his essay wasn't strong because he couldn't find good scholarly resources on his topic, and he decided not to do that check. So that's always something to keep in the back of your mind for those more scholarly essays. Now, once you have your topic, then especially for those argumentative essays, you want to envision your audience. And I always talk about to my classes, you want to think about who's your envisioned or ideal audience versus whoever your actual audience might be. So if you write a book and it gets published, hallelujah, and it goes out on the bookshelf and it's at Barnes and Noble, do you have any control who picks up that book and buys it? No, right? So I could write a Bible study book for women about the book of Genesis. I could get it published and it could go out on the shelves on Barnes and Noble. Probably wouldn't accept it, but you get the idea. And if it's on the shelf of Barnes and Noble and a 12-year-old boy picks up the book and starts reading it, is that my target audience? No, my target audience is adult Christian women. However, I can't control that particular kid picking up the book in that moment. What you're thinking about whenever you're thinking about audience is, I want to picture who I'm writing to. If I could picture my ideal audience, my target audience, who am I thinking about? For some of us, this may be a little bit, again, more of a struggle because you're like, well, I'm writing to my professor. Okay. And sometimes that's fine. And you're just saying, okay, I'm telling my professor about my faith and learning journey. I know that they want me to be academic. I know they want me to be formal, but this is also reflective. They want to find out about me. Okay. I know who that is. For some of us, we're in the context of like that persuasive essay, and we're going to be thinking about, okay, I need to persuade a group of people. Who is that group of people? What do I need to know about them? Maybe I need to know if they're males or females or both. Maybe I need to know something about their education level or about their culture. Almost certainly, you're going to want to know something about what they believe. Their beliefs are going to be key. For me, whenever I'm writing Bible studies, I'm assuming that my audience is Christian. If I'm not writing to a Christian audience, then I'm writing completely differently than if I'm writing to a Christian audience. I'm also assuming that they have some level of familiarity with the Bible. So there are some things that I don't explain. I don't explain where the book of Psalms is. However, I'm also assuming that they haven't done the same amount of research that I have. And so there's a lot of things that I'm taking time to explain, which although I've done research, and certainly there are some people in the audience that I know have done that research. But my envisioned audience is, I know that there's at least a cross section of people who haven't done this research, and they're the audience that I'm writing to. And so this can be helpful, again, especially for persuasive essays, not as much for expository. Questions on audience? Moving forward. Okay, so this was step 3, building the claim. So whenever we're thinking about a claim or making a stance, we always want to think about the questions how and why so that we're not too broad. So if I just said causes of homelessness, that's very broad, right? Like where? So asking those how, when, where, why, how questions can help us to narrow down our topic. And as we're asking those questions, again, as we're answering them, we're going to make our stance more and more specific. So we always want to follow sort of this general list here. We want our thesis claims to be focused, something that's researchable. Again, not like my poor kid who was trying to do anime versus superheroes. We want it to be feasible. Causes of homelessness in general might be too big of a topic for a 3-page paper. So we want to make something more focused, something that's more specific. On the other hand, we also want something that's at least a little bit complex. Like, you know, I mean, I hesitate to say, you know, best types of water bottles. You actually probably could get a 3 to 4 page paper about why, you know, what makes a water bottle a good water bottle. And that actually might be something that's complex enough. But depending on the length of the paper and what the paper is asking of from you, something like that might not be complex enough. And especially for our persuasive essays, for our FAS 100 essays, we want something that's relevant. We don't want to be talking about, okay, well, in the 1800s, they were really arguing about this. And so I'm going to argue about that. Your professor is going to say, hey, no. We want to think about today. And for the faith and learning paper, especially, you're thinking about taking those principles and how they have impacted your life in the past and how it's now intersecting with the today. How is it impacting you and your learning journey today? And of course, that's specific to FAS 100. Expository essay, you get a little bit more wiggle room with how you're picking your topic. Now, as we put the claim together, again, and this specifically is thinking about the persuasive essay. You're going to have something like your audience. The word should indicates that it's persuasive. So if you are doing an expository essay, whether it's for FAS 100 or LAN 100, you are not going to use the word should. You're going to use is statements or something like that because it's a different kind of essay. So if it's persuasive, you're going to have the word should plus your stance or position, and you're always going to have your position. And that is your claim. I like to tell my students that's the first half of your thesis statement. Your claim includes your audience, the word should for persuasive essays, and your stance. Let's look at an example here. American Christians, that's my audience, should vote to legalize abortion without exceptions or restrictions. Now, some of you may be like, whoa, that's pretty, wait, I thought this was a Christian, wait, what's going on here? This is a essay for the, this is a thesis statement for the flip-flop essay. So for the flip-flop essay for LAN 101, which all of you will eventually be in if you're not in right now, what you have to do is the first paper, you have to write an argumentative paper that is against your real position on a topic. So for me, I believe that abortion should be outlawed. And so for the flip-flop essay, I would have to argue against that. And so I would be arguing to myself, American Christians. And then I have the word should. Vote to legalize abortion is the claim. And then I have it more specific. I've made it a little bit more specific. I have a little bit more detail there. And that's an example of a claim. If you were doing this in an expository sense, you might say that Ooh, let's see, expository essay topics. In the Old Testament writers, or in the Bible, Old Testament writers use the structures of chiasm, repetition, and pictures to communicate their message. So that's, I don't have the audience in there. I don't have the word should, but I do have my position is that they use elements to communicate their message. Now, subclaims. Remember, we said that there were, there's the claim, which is sort of the first half of your thesis statement, and that communicates the stance you're taking, the overarching idea. Your subclaims, reasons, supports, or evidences are going to be the things that you actually end up talking about throughout the course of your essay. The claim or the stance is the thing that drives the essay, but there's not going to be like one part of the essay that just talks about the message that those biblical writers were trying to convey. Or in my first example, that American Christians should vote to legalize abortion, there's not going to be one single paragraph that talks about that. Instead, my subclaims are going to be the things that I develop that help to prove that overarching stance. Oftentimes, you're going to use the word because. Again, this is especially the case for your argumentative thesis statements. If you are not doing an argumentative thesis statement, then you're just going to list your things. So like I said, for my expository thesis statement, I said biblical writers of the Old Testament use, and then I listed my 3 items: the chiastic structure, the repetition, and pictures to communicate their message. And so those were my 3 elements, and that's going to turn into my 3 body paragraphs for my essay. For your faith and learning paper, you're going to have your 3 principles, and those are essentially your subclaims. Those are the things that are going to be developed in each paragraph. And of course, you may have more than 3, you may have 4, you may have 5. Generally speaking, especially for LAN 100 and 101, they want 3. Your professors will want 3 areas of development. Other times you may run into a class where they're a little bit more free, but 3 is still a good, strong general rule of thumb. We as humans like the number 3. There's something about it that's just sort of like sticks with us, and we just sort of take it along, and it's memorable. So 3 is a good rule of thumb. We also want to use parallel structure. Now, parallel structure has to do with grammar. It has to do with how we phrase things, and it's really only demonstrable with actual examples. So I will show you guys a couple of examples of parallel structure here. So this is a sample second half of the thesis statement, and again, this is for a persuasive essay. Because abortion supports bodily autonomy, fetuses do not have personhood/rights, and rape victims should not be forced to undergo more trauma. And again, remember, this is the context for the flip-flop essay where I'm arguing against my real position. And these are actually arguments that if you go to that Credo reference pro-con article, a lot of those arguments are there. And so like the very first argument in favor of abortion is the bodily autonomy argument. I think the second one is the fetal personhood one. So these are not just, I didn't pull them out of my back pocket. These are based on research. And that's important because we always want our subclaims to be based on research, which is why even for your FAS 100 essay, where you're reflecting on those principles and how that interacts with your own faith and learning, your professor is still asking for you to cite evidence. So for most of the time in our scholarly academic essays, we're going to be wanting to cite evidence throughout our essays. Any questions before we continue forward? Okay. Now I have version 1 here, which I just read, and then version 2. And this, I only have this up just so you can see differences in parallel structure. So in this first version, version 1, I have essentially sentences. Because reason 1, abortion supports bodily autonomy. That could be a sentence on its own. Number 2, fetuses do not have personhood/rights. Number 3, rape victims should not be forced to undergo more trauma. As we talked about last week in our punctuation workshop, whoop, whoop. So we have a subject, we have verbs, and then we have some objects. And that's simple sentences. So that's the structure, that's a parallel structure. Each one of those subclaims follows the same format. Subject, verb, object. Subject, verb, object. Subject, verb, object. And that's great. That is parallel. Now for version 2, I took these same ideas, I didn't change any of them, and I changed it to a infinitive phrase structure. Notice that I don't have the word because it wouldn't make sense to say because to support. That doesn't make sense with the English language. Instead, I would say, so Americans should legalize abortion, or whatever the rest of it is, to support bodily autonomy, to dispel the false claim that fetuses have personhood/rights, and to prevent rape victims from undergoing more trauma. So notice here that the parallel phrasing is the infinitive phrases: to support, to dispel, to prevent. Either one of these is technically correct. Like I could use either one. I just don't want to mix the two. So I wouldn't want to say abortion supports bodily autonomy to dispel the false claim that fetuses have personhood/rights, and rape victims should not be forced to undergo more trauma. I want to stick with the same pattern throughout the entire thing. And this can be something that's a little bit tricky and takes time to get right. But the more you practice it, the more you start to see, oh, that's not parallel. I need to change this so that it's all the same verb form or the same subject verb form. Any questions right here just on the parallel structure? Y'all you were like, I didn't know I was coming for punctuation today. All right. So then with our thesis construction, we're making one big, beautiful, cohesive, complete sentence. American Christians should vote to legalize abortion without exceptions or restrictions. Remember, that was my claim. Because, reason 1, abortion supports bodily autonomy. Number 2, fetuses do not have personhood/rights. And number 3, rape victims should not be forced to undergo more trauma. And that is one cohesive sentence. I have everything tied together in one big, beautiful thing. That's always what you want to aim for. You always want to aim for having your overarching idea tied into those sub ideas all in one sentence. Now, if you're thinking about moving to the end, in your conclusion, you can change things up a little bit and spread your thesis statement out into multiple sentences. But especially for your introduction, you want to make sure that you have it all in one big, beautiful, cohesive sentence. Questions on that? Now that we've sort of talked about the organization of your thesis statement, we get to talk about how your thesis is essentially a blueprint for your essay. This is a basic outline. Your introduction, you may or may not have a background or context section. Subclaim 1, subclaim 2, subclaim 3. If you are doing that persuasive essay, you're going to have a counter argument or refutation. If not, then you would do something like you would just skip it and go straight to your conclusion. Everybody's probably, whether you're doing FAS 100, it's just going to be introduction, your 3 principles, principle 1, principle 2, principle 3, and then your conclusion. LAN 100, you're doing introduction, maybe background, and then subclaim 1, subclaim 2, subclaim 3, and then your conclusion. So it only gets simpler from this basic outline. But this is the basic outline that you're going to use for any essay. And so these subclaims, each one of these Roman numerals is a separate paragraph. So your introduction is a paragraph. Your background is a paragraph. This subclaim or this supporting idea is a paragraph, etc. And so if your thesis statement has your 3 subclaims in it, then you know right off the bat, okay, my first subclaim is going to go right into that first subclaim spot after my background context. Perfect. My middle one is going to go into subclaim spot number 2, and my last subclaim is going to go in subclaim number 3. And remember, we talked about as well that it also provides that roadmap for the reader That's exactly what we're talking about here. If you use a good thesis statement and you lay out your ideas clearly, your reader is going to know exactly what you're talking about and the order that you're going to discuss things in. Now, some professors may tell you to include your counter argument in your thesis statement. Most won't, though. So if you're doing a persuasive essay, most will say that it's fine to just leave the counter argument to the side and it's going to be responding to one of your subclaims. So just pin that, put it to the side. Most of you won't have to worry about that. Let's look at an example of how we would make this work. All right, so I have my introduction. Remember, your thesis statement is going where in your introduction? Which sentence? First, middle, last? Regina.
The last.
The last sentence of your introduction. I try to tell my students, they're like, the last. I'm like, say it was bigger, like you mean it. So yeah, it's the last sentence of our introduction. So American Christians should vote to legalize abortion without exceptions or restrictions because abortion supports bodily autonomy, fetuses do not have personhood/rights, and rape victims should not be forced to undergo more trauma. So now as we look at how we plug these things into the essay, I have background context, which is just a separate thing. And then I have subclaim 1 right there. Abortion supports bodily autonomy. Subclaim 2, fetuses do not have personhood rights/rights. And then subclaim 3, which I literally just copied and pasted. It's so easy. But I don't know about you guys, but again, sometimes whenever I'm writing, I just feel like my ideas are all over the place and I'm not really sure what to talk about where. And again, a clear thesis statement just takes care of that problem and says, okay, this is exactly what I'm going to talk about. And this is the order that I'm going to talk about them in. So that when your professor asks you for that outline, you already have them in an order and you're ready to go. Ready to rock and roll. Roll and rock. And that's the end of our presentation. So we talked about how all the way at the beginning, thesis statement, how it's not just a topic, it's not just a question, but it's actually the answer to our question. It's saying, okay, we are going to develop an idea. We're going to take a stance on something, and we're going to do research to back that up. The research is going to reveal the specific sub areas, those subclaims or supports that I'm actually going to talk about in my body paragraphs. I'm going to take all of those ideas together and wrap them into one big, beautiful thesis statement, which I will then use to organize my entire essay. I see we got some questions here. So Regina, what is your question? You are muted.
I definitely hit that first before I started. Anyway, so the introduction.
Yes.
Last sentence is your thesis statement, but you're not actually going to write thesis statement. You're just gonna.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Sometimes though, so whenever I actually like to write from my outline, and so I'll label everything in my outline. I'll be like thesis statement, boom, hook, boom, introduce the issue, boom, and I'll label every piece so that it's easy for my professor to grade.
Gotcha.
In my essay, you get rid of all the labels, especially for MLA. Now, if you're in APA, for some of you later in like psychology classes, or if any of you are doing criminology, that would be APA. For those types of classes, APA does tend to use some subheadings. MLA, not as much.
Okay.
Great question. Any other questions, comments, anything you want us to recap? Great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, again, I promised that I would show you things that are available for you. So if you go back to the library page, and I'll show it to you from the start. So if you go to lbc.edu, scroll down to research guides. Instead of scrolling down to literature and language, you can click on academic services. Now from this tab, you can look at two things. One will show you looking forward, the other will show you looking back. So Ally Center will show you what we have available moving forward. So if you scroll down to so this was our last workshop for October. How did we get to the end of October, y'all? November is right around the corner. Christmas is in less than 2 months. What are we doing? Anyway, so you can see that the next workshops that we have are coming up. The next one that I'm doing is Lights, Camera, Record, where we will go through all different sorts of multimedia presentations, which your professors will be asking you to do. So if you are unfamiliar with any of them, we will be going over the most common ones. So pin that, put that on your to attend list. So that's our upcoming workshops. So that was number 2, option number 2. Option number 3 doesn't look like it's gonna be particularly of something related to the Ally Center workshops, although we do have oodles and noodles of content and resources for you. But if you come over here to the far right-hand side and click on resource videos, this is the full list of all of those workshops that we've done in the past, that we've edited, and that we have published. Once you click on any of them, it'll take you to our YouTube page, and you can also view the full list of items there as well, which is great. I wanted to make sure that it did actually pause. Nope. See, I knew that it was going to trick me. Just like Regina with the mute button. I was like, you thought you clicked on me and I said that I paused, but I'm not actually gonna. And so again, you can access the full list from our Ally Center page, Ally Center LBC as well. You can browse through those, lots of fun stuff. Of course, if you are ever in need of any one-on-one assistance, we at the Ally Center are here to be helpful. You can schedule an appointment with any of our tutors, find a time that works for you. And if you can't find something, please feel free to reach out and we'll see what we can do for you. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. And I hope everybody has a simply fabulous rest of your evening.